All right, let's dive into one of history's most incredible and, frankly, gutsy acts of defiance. We're talking about the story of a German monk, Martin Luther, and the document that changed the world, the 95 Theses.
So I want you to picture this. The date is October 31st, 1517. In a pretty small German town, a single monk walks up to the main church door and nails a piece of paper to it. This one simple act was a direct, public challenge to the Pope, the most powerful man in the entire Western world.
I mean, this was not just some minor complaint. This was an act of rebellion that could have, and probably should have, cost him his life. So you have to ask, what on earth would make a man risk absolutely everything against that kind of power?
Well, to really get why Luther did what he did, we actually have to rewind a bit and take a look at what was going on in Rome. And believe it or not, it all starts with a massive, and I mean massively expensive, art project.
The dream was huge, right? The plan was to tear down the old St. Peter's Basilica and build the most magnificent, awe-inspiring church the world had ever laid eyes on. It was going to be a monument to God, for sure, but also, let's be honest, to the power of the papacy itself.
But like a lot of ambitious building projects, this one hit a pretty big snag early on. Pope Julius II gets it all started, but then his architect basically gets stuck. He literally doesn't know how to build the gigantic dome they designed. Then, in 1513, a new pope, Leo X, takes over. Now this guy is from the super wealthy de' Medici family. He's a huge fan of the arts, and he just doubles down, bringing in Renaissance legends like Raphael and Michelangelo to get the job done.
But here's the reality check. Hiring the greatest artists of your generation, well, it's not cheap. And pretty soon, the church's bank accounts were draining at a terrifying rate. Pope Leo X had a very serious cash flow problem.
So how do you fund the world's most expensive building project when you're running out of cash? Well, you get creative. And this leads us to the church's, let's just call it a highly controversial and very innovative fundraising strategy.
The whole plan really hinged on a deal between two very powerful men. You've got Pope Leo X, who desperately needs money for his basilica, but has no intention of using his own family's massive fortune. And on the other side, you've got this guy, Albert of Mainz, a German noble who really wants to be the Archbishop of Mainz, but he doesn't have the money to pay the Pope the required fee. And this is where the product they were selling comes in. It was called an indulgence. The basic idea was that you could pay the church money, and in return, you get a piece of paper that essentially guarantees forgiveness for your sins. It could even shorten the time your dead relatives had to spend in purgatory, which was seen as this sort of spiritual waiting room before heaven.
So here's how the scheme worked, step by step. First, Albert agrees to pay the Pope a huge amount of money for his new title. Second, to get that money, he hires this famously persuasive priest named Johann Tetzel to be his salesman. And third, Tetzel goes on a fundraising tour selling these indulgences to everyday people.
And Tetzel, well, he had an unbelievably effective marketing jingle. He would tell the crowds, every time a coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory it springs. I mean, it was catchy, it was direct, and it made salvation sound like something you could just buy right then and there.
Meanwhile, back in Germany, our monk, Martin Luther, is watching this whole circus unfold, and he doesn't see a clever fundraising scheme. He sees a deep spiritual crisis, a corruption that he thinks is threatening the very soul of his church. And that brings us right back to that church door. In response to what Tetzel was doing, Luther writes up his 95 Theses. Now, you got to understand, this wasn't really a declaration of war, at least not at first. It was a list of arguments written in Latin for other theologians to debate. The church door was just the town's bulletin board. But the arguments themselves, they were explosive. Take Thesis 86. It asks a simple but devastating question. He basically says, look, the Pope is richer than the wealthiest tycoons of the day. So why is he building this basilica with the money of poor believers instead of his own? It's a fantastic point. And he kept poking holes in the logic of the whole thing. In another thesis, number 82, he asks this razor-sharp question. If the Pope really has the power to free souls from purgatory, why would he charge for it? Why not just empty the whole place out of pure Christian love and charity for free? All of these questions really stemmed from two core beliefs Luther held, and they were truly radical for the time. First, he believed the Bible, not the Pope, was the one true religious authority. And second, he believed that people could only be saved through their faith alone, not by doing good deeds and definitely not by making cash payments.
Now, Luther might have intended to start a quiet, scholarly debate, but that is so not what happened. What happened next was basically the 16th century equivalent of a post going viral, and it ignited an explosion that would change the world forever.
Almost instantly, someone took the 95 Theses, translated them from academic Latin into everyday German, and just started printing copies. An argument meant for a handful of scholars was suddenly being read and debated by ordinary people all across the country.
So how was this even possible? One invention, the printing press. You have to remember, this was the ultimate disruptive technology of its day. Before the press, everything was copied by hand. Books were incredibly rare and expensive. The press made it possible to spread ideas quickly and cheaply to everyone. It was, no joke, the internet of the 1500s.
And that was the spark. That one act, a monk nailing a list of arguments to a church door, became the catalyst for the Protestant Reformation, a seismic movement that would shatter the unity of the Catholic Church and completely reshape Western civilization as we know it.
So why does this 500-year-old story still matter? Well, think about it. At its core, the indulgence was just a shortcut, right? It was a way to get the reward of heaven without doing the hard internal work of actually being sorry for your sins. And that's not so different from the shortcuts we sometimes look for today.
Which kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Whenever we look for the easy way out, the quick fix for a complicated problem, the reward without putting in the real work, are we, in our own small way, just trying to buy a modern-day indulgence?